As we move on to our next panel, the opportunity of Irish impact investing, we will share with you a unique and exciting opportunity for the Irish community abroad to unite and work together for profit, but also for social and global good. Susan Hayes Culleton, known to many of us as the positive economist, but otherwise Managing Director Hayes Culleton and IIBN Ireland board member, will be moderating this session, which includes our esteemed guest of honor, Minister Jimmy Deenihan. So please welcome Susan.
Can I just ask if we could just get some mics for the panelists, please? They're over here. They're telling me that you... Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for having me here today. I suppose I just want to start off by saying we have an All-Ireland Kerry footballer medalist here, hence the reason I togged out in the Cork colours. Hashtag just saying. I'm watching you. I have looked at the IIBN logo for a long time, and I particularly have looked at the OpportUnity logo an awful long time over the last couple of weeks. And I was really thinking about what it means. So what does it mean when one line is Irish and one line is in the US and we have the little bit in the middle? And I'm looking around the audience today and I can see it. I can see Andy Rogers back there, who's probably one of the most connected people in the world. I see Ross Finnegan back there, the chair of IIBN London. I see Monica Murphy from Maneer Development Services here, who's an IIBN Virgin. I'm seeing Mary McKenna here. She is an IIBN London mentor. I'm seeing Jerry Moan, who has just disappeared from out behind there, and his CFO, Mark Louth, who are joining Irish and American companies together to transplant them. I'm looking also at Alva at the back there, because in 2012, I was planning a trade mission over here. And I said to her, I have a stopover in New York. And I said, I'd love to be able to do something with it. Can you help me? Is there something on? And she says, well, there is if you'll speak at it. So I got an invite to an audience with myself at the time. And she made that happen. And you see, that's what IIBN does. I write the IIBN blog. I'm a true IIBNer. And also I'm a board member in Dublin. And I am absolutely, wholly aware of the opportunity, and I mean that every letter of that word, that's available to each and every one of us today. Because the world is flat. And I'm looking here at Pat Carroll in front of me. He's the Jerry Ryan lookalike with the pink shirt, in case you don't know who. He's also Twitter king. I'm looking at Coleman Lydon at the back, who favourites every tweet that I've ever sent out. And the thing is that we don't have to just be in one city or another to have the opportunity to connect. But today we do. Don't waste a minute of it. So it's on this very point that I want to introduce my panel. And today we're going to talk about impact investing. Now, I'm a CFA by profession, which is a chartered financial analyst, and I'm a trainer by trade. So let me just give you a very, very brief lesson in the financial markets. When you invest money in a bond, the idea is you put money into something with a view to getting a return. Either that is a fixed return, like 6%, or it's a variable return, like in line with the LIBOR or with the US Fed interest rate, etc., etc. But today we're talking about something that's truly revolutionary. Today we are talking about diaspora bonds. So let me tell you what this is. So yes, you put money into this instrument, but the return this time is not linked to an interest rate. The return this time is not guaranteed to deliver upon a certain percentage rate. This one is connected to the impact that the diaspora can have on social problems at home. So I'm not going to talk to you any more about that. I'm now going to hand over to a couple of people within our panel, but I'm just going to start off with talking about the diaspora, given that we have the unique opportunity to have the Minister for State for the Diaspora here with us today, namely Minister Jimmy Deenihan. So my first question to him as a panellist is, what do you see is changing within the diaspora today? Because the thing is that in 2012 we invited the diaspora home to visit as part of the gathering. In 2014, as Cathal Gaffney says, we're inviting the diaspora home to work and to stay, because there aren't enough of us there anymore. So my question to you is, what do you see differently?
Well, thank you very much, Susan, and certainly I'll be recommending you to the Cork GA to take over their football team.
Below the belt, Minister.
But no, I've been, I suppose, coming to America, for example, for the last over 40 years, and I've been involved in, I suppose, a group from the Silicon Valley, from San Jose, since 1991. And as you know, Dublin is twinned with San Jose, and the mayor of San Jose was a man called Tom McHenry, and he set up that twinning relationship between Dublin and San Jose back in 1986, and that has had enormous benefit for Dublin and for Ireland. He's a very good friend of mine, and over the years, the first one, the big development was Intel, and he and the group with him played a critical role in just delivering that. And last evening, actually, I met John Humeson. He's probably here in the audience somewhere. I met him at the reception, and John Hume played a critical role, actually, in bringing Seagate to Derry. And I know the story. Actually, it was heading for Clonmel, but John Hume, Tom McHenry, a man called Brendan Hagerty, who was a senior vice president of Seagate, combined to convince Seagate to go to Derry. And we heard about that major announcement recently. It's providing many jobs for both Derry and Donegal and that whole area. So I could see how people can really influence the location of industry. I know the IDA, I suppose, never fully recovered from that loss of Seagate at that particular time, but where individuals actually made a difference. It has changed a lot over the years. You wouldn't have an event like this 10 years ago. I was coming to New York, trying to attract people to go back to Ireland. Back 20 years ago, I was in charge of the food industry, and I visited a number of companies around America. But you had no organisations such as this, IIBN, and other organisations as well. So it's because of you, really, and because of the number of young, enthusiastic, confident people that things have changed. And I would just like to mention, Susan, Connect Ireland. Now we have thousands of connectors all over the world at this moment of time. And some of you may understand what it's all about. In other words, if you can identify somebody, introduce them to the IDA, if the jobs can be validated, then you get a reward for it if you want it, something like €1,500 a job. Now already 26 projects have been delivered by Connect Ireland. And Connect Ireland are in an advanced stage of negotiation with 88 companies. So it's working, and I've seen it working on the ground as well. So things have changed. It has changed because of modern technology, because of networking, because more people are meeting each other. Already, I'm sure today, business has been done. And I've even seen a number of connections myself that I can make with people here. Already, we have even discussed the project with people here that would have a connection with the project that we are talking about. So,
Minister,
you've
spoken a lot about the past and about the present, and I just want to ask you one question about the future. On your election, in this particular role, in the Irish Central, you were quoted as, Minister Deenihan's appointment shows the importance of 70 million people of Irish heritage throughout the world, and the challenges that face him, including immigration reform for the 50,000 undocumented Irish in the US. So given that a general election is latest, we'll say, around the time of the Rising in 2016, what do you hope to achieve in 2015 for these people who are in front of you today?
Well, it's a very complex issue. Capitol Hill, it's a place where Ireland has a lot of influence, but we cannot overstate that influence either. We can certainly lobby. There has been an impasse passed, as some of you would know, on immigration reform, especially since 9/11, which kind of totally changed the psyche of America. But President Obama has made a commitment before the midterm elections that he would use the authorities that he has at his disposal to create change, hopefully very shortly. And even after the midterm elections, which didn't work out too well for his party, he still persisted in saying that he was going to introduce change. On the other side, the Republican Party, who would seem to have been resistant to any change in recent times, having said that, Paul Ryan has committed to substantial change. And the Republicans were saying, we don't want any tinkering with the whole immigration legislation. We want substantial change. So hopefully that President Obama can introduce the changes that he can do within his, I suppose, authorities, as he described them as, and then that the Republicans will bring in more substantial change. One thing that President Obama has mentioned, that Irish people here with American children, with American citizens, that they would get preferential treatment who are here paying their taxes, who are working and making a major contribution. So just, I suppose, my direct influence is that I'm going to Washington in January, so I would hope to meet the main players in the whole immigration issue and just bring, I suppose, the message from the Irish diaspora, especially the diaspora here in America who are undocumented, to Washington very forcibly. But I don't want to raise people's hopes either. I've been involved in immigration, the whole issue, since 1985, and I know how difficult and complex it can be. That time I could have access to people like Edward Kennedy, which I had, Foley, Moynihan, Tip O'Neill, really powerful people in Capitol Hill. We have some very influential people there at the moment, and but we probably had more power that time.
Just conscious of our time at the moment, and I'm also thinking of the influential people, of course, who are the people who could mobilise these diaspora notes. And that's why I want to move to Dash now, to tell us, could you give us, as somebody from Merrill Lynch, just a little bit of information about how these actual diaspora notes work, and more importantly, what makes them work from the perspective of the investors?
Sure. So, good morning. Thanks, Susan. The big idea here around the social impact bond is really that there's preventative services that are proven, that work, that perhaps may not get funded by government just for budgetary reasons. So social impact bonds can address that issue by raising private capital to fund those services, and then they're delivered. They would be measured to see what the results were, and government would pay only for success out of the savings that resulted from delivery of those services.
So what if the results aren't delivered? Does that mean somebody could effectively lose their investment?
That would happen if results didn't meet the threshold for success.
And is that then seen as basically an extension of philanthropy? So you put in your money, the results didn't materialise, and therefore if I was to put money into the Ireland Fund, for example, I don't expect it back. So is that the whole idea, that you give with the intention of it doing good, but if it doesn't come back, well then it still has done good, and that's the way you look at it?
I think people would look at it in a lot of different ways. Certainly that's a perspective we've heard. Ideally, it does work out, and then those funds can be recycled into another project, hopefully.
And from that point then, I just want to move on to Norman, as somebody from the Northern Ireland Bureau. Let's say, for example, one of these bonds, it raises between 5 and 20 million. And the investors are happy to leave the investment there for between, let's say, 3 to 7 years. What projects in Northern Ireland do you think could deliver measurable results?
Well, Susan, I think maybe the most obvious one from the Northern Ireland government's perspective is in social capital.
We have in Northern Ireland a very stable political system, and we have a lot of investment coming in, something just like the Minister mentioned earlier about Seagate, which is one of our top companies. But we still have a group of young people in Northern Ireland who are not in employment, training, or indeed in any sort of work environment or education. And we have looked at a thing called the United Youth Programme. And this is something I think could benefit from the bond that you're talking about. Essentially what it does is it takes these young people who have no expectation of getting employment, are generally without any real education, and are the type of young people that could be drawn, unfortunately, into criminal activity. And the whole idea of the United Youth Programme is that they get training and voluntary work that takes them out of that milieu where they're really not getting any promotion in their life, One aspect of it is a 6-week program in the United States. And this is very similar to a project called Wider Horizons, which was funded for some years by the International Fund for Ireland. And it brought young people out here. And because they were coming to really a foreign country, they were forced to mix with each other, whether they were from a unionist or nationalist tradition. They had to mix with each other here. They had to work in a multicultural society, and they went back with renewed confidence and usually into the employment field. And I think essentially there's 2 issues about the bond that Dash is talking about. One is that the expectation of these young people entering the employment world is much more enhanced, and they're no longer claiming benefit. But there are also hidden benefits for the Northern Ireland government in that they're no longer dealing with social services, probation boards, etc., etc. They're less likely to be caught up in criminal activity. So for the criminal justice system, there's a benefit as well and less activity in that particular area.
So just to summarise for the audience, so I put in my money, and the return that I might expect to get is not, as I say, linked to an interest rate or to an equity, but instead would be linked to the actual measurable decrease in, for example, unemployment or decrease in criminal activity. So therefore, the actual beneficiary is not just the individuals, but the wider state in terms of the taxes that it doesn't have to spend on various other different measures to prevent these types of activities from taking place.
Very much so, but then there's the subliminal ones that you can't really judge, and you're actually challenging young people to accept somebody from the other community in a way that they wouldn't have done before. And actually in Northern Ireland in particular, as we get more and more economic migrants coming in, and we haven't had a great reputation as being a welcoming country for immigrants who are here to work, it actually challenges people's views about living and working in a multicultural society. So there are other aspects which are more long-term about political stability and social cohesion.
Okay, so the next part to this, of course, is that if the return is related to a decrease in criminal activity or a decrease in unemployment, who actually provides the return? And the answer in this case, actually, is the New York State Department when you look at a diaspora bond being run here. And that's why I'm really, really interested to ask Drew O'Brien here from the US State Department, why would you be willing to pay for a decrease in criminal activity or in unemployment in a different country? Why is it that the New York State Department has a vested interest in the Irish diaspora?
Well, thanks, Susan. It's a very good question, and it's applicable right now because one of the things that our office is doing, so the Office of, I'm the Special Representative for Global Partnerships within the Secretary's office, and one of our charges there is diaspora engagement globally. And when you look at the Irish-American diaspora, it's the second largest. What are we doing wrong? It's behind, I think we're behind Germany. You're going to work on that.
We'll both work on it together.
But about 39, I want to say about 39.5 million. So in a lot of ways, the Irish-American diaspora is a prototypical diaspora for other populations in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. So we look to your government ministers, we look to your academic experts, we look to some of your practitioners on how to guide some of these other populations. And one of the things that we're very active hands-on with is building networks, and building networks of academics, building networks of entrepreneurs. We do what I call a lot of entrepreneur exporting and some importing. We'll bring groups of people from Silicon Valley and Cambridge, Mass. We'll bring them abroad, give 5 or 6 day trainings to groups of young people interested in this. We'll similarly bring young people from other countries here, bring them to Silicon Valley, and they spend 5, 6 days. They learn how to make a pitch, talk to an investor. That's one way we engage them. I want to jump off and use the example that Norman brought up of United Youth, which is actually what steered us into what Dash was talking about. We are now exploring with our managing partner for all of the partnerships we do in the Secretary's office. We bring in an outside group, a 501c3, to help us manage the different partners. We're a bit of a dating service. We bring partners together, we put them together, we hope they do great things.
Do they have babies?
Well, still young. Our partner on diaspora engagement is the Calvert Foundation in Bethesda, Maryland, and they are not only helping us sort of manage the day-to-day and the dynamics, but they're actually an investment firm, and they have a not-for-profit arm, the Calvert Foundation, and who has a history of 100% rate of return. They have a product called a community investment note, and from that, and from a lot of the conversations we had with the Northern Ireland government, how do we help those young people that Norman talked about? How do we address this in a non-traditional way? And we're looking at a diaspora note coming out of the community investment note, the diaspora note, and how we engage the diaspora in helping at home. To get to your question, we do that because it's a vested interest for the diasporans are Americans. And they're hyphenated Americans, Irish Americans, Somali Americans. They are our citizens. We have a responsibility to them. They have a responsibility to their home, and we want to help them with that responsibility.
I want to give you one more alarm bell that's flashing in my head, and that is when you apply private investment to a social problem, you have two different agendas. And my question is that if I was to put money into this bond with a view to getting a return, like, yes, of course I want to do good, of course I do. But I also want a return. At the end of the day, I have a family to feed and a mortgage to pay. So, is this particular innovation in danger of only investing in short-term projects, the quick wins, the highly deliverables, the easy ones, at the expense of long-term projects?
So, let's not forget, you're dealing with government. So nothing happens necessarily too quickly.
Well, you said that, not me.
No, I'm saying it. And that's one of the reasons we bring in private partners. We are looking, we're looking at both. As we look at this in the very early stages with Calvert, we look at short-term fixes. We certainly have, I think, based on the political climate and some of the things we need to do, Norman, I think we're looking at a quick fix, perhaps, in Northern Ireland. But we are also looking at the longer-term fixes, how they can benefit infrastructure, how they can benefit education, health, and other projects that we hear from our embassies, we hear from our friends in country, and we hear from our diasporans.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. I personally think that we are on the cusp of a really big change in the way in which diasporans are invited to help others. And I think IIBN for me, and this is a personal experience, is that it has always opened doors for me in other countries to where I always felt, and I was interested to hear the entrepreneurs earlier saying about, it's difficult to start off in Silicon Valley or to start off in New York, to start off in London. It's not difficult when you have a family there waiting for you, and I mean a business family. And again, I go back to a sporting analogy. Before, we were bound by the ties of sport, and we were bound by the ties of, one brother went out, then he had a job for another one, and then they came out. Whereas now I found that I had a business, and then as I was coming out to New York or to London or any of the other places that IIBN is active, well, then I had a group of people there who were willing to say, Susan, what can we do? And it wasn't something like, it's raining, so what do we do? It was a real, Susan, what business can I open up the doors for you to do? Before I finish in this panel, I just want to go back to Dash one more time. Because Dash has actually experience of running this before. And you've actually run this you've actually implemented this with Merrill Lynch with a previous client. What have you personally learned from that experience that we, as potential investors, or as potential people who will be putting this together, or indeed as potential people behind the drawdown of these funds, what can we learn from you today?
Sure. So I'll mention three critical pieces that you can think of as ingredients to these types of projects. First, you need high-performing not-for-profits or service providers that are delivering services and have a history of doing so, data behind it, et cetera. Second, you need really strong executive leadership within the government that you're working with, simply because it's a new, innovative space and you need someone to sponsor and pull together. And third, and this is probably obvious, you need investors who care passionately about the underlying social cause that you're addressing and are willing to engage on something that they probably haven't heard about before. And our experience is that they are willing to do that because investors are increasingly looking to reflect impact in their investment portfolio.
Well, I think we've heard an awful lot today about what the future will look like. And often as an economist, we're often asked to predict the future. But I do think that, thanks to Norman, thanks to Drew, thanks to Minister Deenihan, and thanks to Dash, that we have really seen that, in the words of Peter Drucker, the only way to predict the future is to create it. To your success today, ladies and gentlemen.